Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to The Funnel is Falling Apart, How to Shape Buyer Decisions Before Traffic. Before we get started, I'd like to take a few minutes and do some introductions. I'm CJ Pace, a product marketing manager here at Contentful,
And I'm Shannon Ryan. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Valtech.
and together we will offer a boots on the ground perspective on how marketing has changed over the last several years. So over the next 30 minutes or so, we plan to dive into three topics: why marketing playbooks are breaking down, the impact that's having on the buyer journey, and how you can adapt and where to get started. So if you're an experienced marketer, you recognize we are at a turning point in marketing, and you're not imagining it. There's more content, there are more channels, and there are fewer resources than ever before. AI as an idea was supposed to make everything easier, but effective marketing has just become more difficult. The system underneath it has fundamentally shifted. How we capture audience attention and garner trust has become much more complicated. And at Contentful, we call this phenomenon the Great Content Collapse. And there are three fundamental elements to the Great Content Collapse. The first is the collapse of the top of the funnel. Next is the collapse of the operating model. And last is the collapse of user engagement. Today, we're going to focus on the collapse in the top of the funnel, or what some would call the entire funnel, due to the changing nature of how consumers are getting their information today. But first, let's define what we mean by the collapse of the top of the funnel. Every organization is seeing a fall off in organic traffic. The reason for that is that 47% of Google searches now trigger AI overviews, and the click-through rates on top-ranked web pages has fallen by about 35%. The new reality is AI-driven search is transforming discoverability, and SEO has given way to GEO, or what we're referring to as generative engine optimization. And these generative engines are becoming the gatekeepers to awareness, in a way determining which brands break through the noise and which don't. The shift introduces a reality where visibility and traffic have now been decoupled. Brands that spent decades optimizing for search are seeing clicks plummet. And it's not because demand has disappeared, but because answers now arrive instantly. When nearly half of all searches end without a single click, the click-through rate becomes a lagging indicator of a much deeper problem, and that's the loss of influence on the buyer journey. So today, the search engine has really become the destination, or like a tactical short-circuiting of the traditional lead generation engine. And when the referral is replaced with a summary, the top of your funnel effectively evaporates. So success is no longer measured by the click. It is measured by whether or not the AI trusts your brand enough to cite it as a definitive source. And so if an AI delivers a complete response that satisfies the buyer, your sales funnel is effectively bypassed. This is the zero-click reality all marketers are now facing. The challenge here is AI is extracting the value and keeping the user. And if your go-to-market strategy relies on winning the click to start the sales conversation, you are measuring a ghost metric. This isn't just a dip in traffic, it's the death of the referral era as we know it. And so my question to the audience is, once the click isn't guaranteed, what happens to your funnel? What happens to your overall narrative? What happens is your digital front door is no longer your homepage. It is a 3-paragraph summary you didn't author. And in an answer-first world, AI has evolved in a way that it now synthesizes opinions into an overview. So by the time a buyer even considers your brand, the answer engine, whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT, or Perplexity, has already defined who you are, what you offer, and how you compare. You are no longer the primary storyteller of your brand. You are the subject of a third-party biography written by an algorithm. There's a much more dangerous byproduct of the AI overview, however, or the zero-click reality, and that's complete brand erasure. Generative engines are now acting as the arbiters of relevance, deciding which brands are even part of the conversation. If it omits your key differentiators or summarizes your pricing based on outdated info, that becomes your brand truth the buyer accepts. You've lost narrative control thanks to the answer engines absorbing early-stage discovery. So what does this really mean for your brand? Well, it means fewer click-throughs because buyers no longer need to explore links the way they once did. AI gives them a summarized answer instantly, meaning the interaction that used to start on your website now starts and often ends inside that overview. This then has a carry-on effect to lower organic traffic. Because those answers happen upstream, fewer visitors actually reach your site. Traffic that used to flow naturally into your funnel now stalls at the summary. This again leads to reduced brand visibility. Fewer people reach your site, your core messages, your differentiators, your proof points. These things may never surface in the buyer's research process. AI becomes a storyteller, and you lose control of how your brand is positioned. This is how organizations risk becoming contextually invisible. In a traditional search, a user might scroll past you, but in an answer engine summary, the user may never know you exist. There is no below the fold in an answer engine overview. You are either in the answer or you are out of consideration. The question is no longer whether your brand's SEO strategy is good enough for a potential customer. It's now whether or not your content infrastructure is capable of being understood by an answer engine. And like we shared previously, roughly half of all searches, depending on the category, are already leading to an AI overview. The question we have for you all is, are you currently satisfied with how your brand is showing up, or are you at risk of becoming invisible to your prospective customers? And so the natural question from there is, so what's the path forward? Well, the good news is we do not believe this is an AI is ruining everything problem. We believe it's a content infrastructure problem. Most legacy DXPs were built for a page-based, click-driven world where you search, click, convert. Answer engines flip that. They summarize first, and the click becomes optional. So to win discovery in an answer-first world, we think there are 3 moves you need to make. First, you have to treat content as structured data so answer engines can reliably interpret it. Second, you must make trust explicit with brand-aligned messaging. AI amplifies what it sees repeatedly. So clarity and consistency stop being nice to have and start being the difference between being summarized and being ignored. Third, you have to deliver seamless, high-performance experiences. In this new world, speed is the entry fee. If your experience is slow or unreliable, you may lose your opportunity to influence how you show up in an AI overview. Not everything has changed, though, as strong SEO is still your foundation, but discovery and engagement now go beyond that. And from here, I'll pass to Shannon to take us through each of these.
So, CJ, 2 things off the start. First, that was an excellent summation, I think, of the challenges that marketers are facing in the new reality of an AI-driven world. So kudos to you on that. Second, I'm incredibly envious of your radio voice. So, I'll do my best here to try and put that together. But I think, seriously, I think your summation was really sort of bang on. What we're witnessing here, what we call at Valtech sort of the collapse of the front door, this idea that we're going from the website being the node of entrance to being a node or one node of entrance within a multitude of different areas where your potential customer is going to interact with your brand or your product. And obviously having a good understanding of how those engines are going to render your content, the implications of how you want to treat that, and some of the changes that I think you need to make, not only in terms of your site and your data and your approach, but your thinking as a team. All of those will come into play. And so I like the way you've sort of structured these 3 areas here. Particularly, we see a tremendous amount of value right off the top to treating content as structured value. We think that's critical. The trust one is one that I think we're going to really dive into as well, because I think, CJ, that's an area where you and I have gone back and forth a couple of times of really trying to understand the importance of trust in that paradigm. And then just obviously making sure that you have a sane and rational plan as it relates to geo, but also SEO, because as you mentioned, SEO is not going away. And so if we were to dive into those sort of topics there, this idea of treating content as structured data is critical. As you can see on the screen here, in terms of the way the engines interpret the data, they don't see it as pages. They truly see it as code. And therefore, sort of making sure that your site is compliant with the various different engines in terms of their ability to clearly articulate and understand what you want them to understand, and recognize that in many cases, the AI engines are rendering your content back in a way that might be helpful for you to begin to think about them in the traditional way that we historically think about personas. And maybe those AI engines become another persona in your sort of understanding of how they're going to act, what journey they go on, etc. So that's food for thought, I think, down the road. So this is one, CJ, where I think you and I can have a bit of a conversation. This idea of making trust explicit is something that we at Valtech spend a lot of time with our clients really trying to understand here. And as many of you may know, that the social aspect of the ingestion of content to drive the big engines, the big LLMs, comes a lot from some of those big sort of social platforms, community forums, Reddit, etc. And so what's really interesting there is that, marketing in many ways is about trying to control the way that your audience sees your brand or interprets your brand. As marketers, we've been trained to try and ensure that we control as many variables as we possibly can in trying to get a potential customer to engage with our brand. We want to make sure that the color is the right color, that the font is the right font, that the serif is hanging the right way. We've kerned the font. We've done all this stuff. And in many ways, our new reality means a lot of that is going away. And therefore, two things are happening. One, the AI engine is sort of ingesting and regurgitating what they think your brand might be. And then the other part of this is this community aspect that is going to feed a lot of the insights from those AIs. What is being said about your brand inside those community platforms actually becomes a bit more important as well. And so I think there's a couple of strategies there that prospective clients really need to consider, because the trust chasm here is going to be an important one as this sort of plays out over the next couple of years.
I think it's a double-edged sword a bit here. AI has made content cheap, abundant, and very forgettable. And so generic content is becoming sort of a liability to brands. Answer engines can't truly judge originality, not the way we do. Instead, they prioritize distinct, structured, high-signal content. So that generic one-size-fits-all content just lacks the signals that AI needs to trust your brand. There's also the downstream effect where if you do end up getting the click from that overview, you've now given your customers or your prospective buyers this AI-generated digital experience, and we see that roughly 50% of users don't trust that content. Right? That number is dropping. Yeah. And this is why trust has to be explicit. You have to build trust with answer engines and your audience through consistent signals such as consistent brand-aligned terminology, a point of view that's recognizably yours with proof-backed claims, and a voice that sounds like a real expert and not something that just matches a content template. Because we have to move beyond just publishing. And I think you've said this before in some of our conversations where content isn't automatically king anymore. The goal now is to create authentic, trusted content that is worth summarizing and worth engaging, that best represents your brand.
Yeah, I mean, we are sort of striking at the heart of that paradigm of content is king. The answer, I kind of feel these days is, maybe. But it comes down to what type of content, the authenticity of that content, the authoritative voice that you bring here. The other thing I think that's super important, CJ, to remember here is, we kind of, we'll remember these past, decade of web development as, the years of abundance when clicks were plentiful. In this new environment, if the AI engines are consuming many of the clicks that would normally end up at your site, then I think it is imperative that when you actually get a click to your site, that you are laser focused in being able to drive that click through the funnel. And I think that's super important because, the age of abundance is actually now behind us, and therefore we're going to have to learn to do more with less. And that's super, super going to demand some diligence and vigilance from our teams.
And
at least I think so.
No, I agree. And hammering on that point, when you do actually get someone to engage with your actual brand, it's important that those experiences be seamless and incredibly highly performant.
I think there's no doubt that the speed at which the content is delivered, that execution layer, if you will, is becoming more and more important as we go through this period of evolution and change. And there's strong empirical data to support that. What's, I think, critical is that, systems like Contentful help build the structure to be able to deliver these experiences at speed, at pace. Not only in terms of just the rendering of that, but actually the content creation side of delivering a high-speed experience, I think, is also as critical.
I agree. And more to that point, we at Contentful, we say that speed now matters twice because it's not just the performance of the experience, but the speed of the operating model behind it, right? Answer engines are going to reward reliable sources, and that reliability includes freshness, consistency, and brand alignment. But at the same time, your internal teams need to move just as fast because engines favor sources that are that stay current and are very consistent.
Yeah.
So the goal here is, go ahead.
No, sorry. If you can't spin that content creation flywheel, to the point where it's a blur, you're going to get left behind. Yeah.
Exactly. These three things together are very important because they keep you discoverable in the answer engine era.
Yes, indeed.
So To operationalize everything we just covered, what you need is a foundation that makes your content consistent, scalable, and trustworthy for AI. And it comes down to 5 things that brands need to deliver best-in-class digital experiences in the answer-first world. First, you have to structure your content as data so it's reusable and scalable. Then you have to unify your operations so your teams aren't stuck in silos and you have one source of truth. Again, consistency is super important to maintaining authority and authenticity. Next, you need to create content at market speed by allowing marketers to create digital experiences independently, and you need to deliver that content everywhere. You want your content to show up across every channel with the consistency and performance answer engines and users expect. And lastly, you need to be able to extend as you grow. You need a platform that can adapt and scale to your specific needs over time. Like you said, Shannon, we've moved from the age of abundance to now this answer engine world, and you need a platform that can adapt to that and the changes that are to come. And that's how you create content AI engines trust and experiences people actually want to engage with. So how do you do that? Well, the punchline is really simple. Contentful is a DXP platform that gives you the tool to build modern digital experiences that win discovery in the answer-first world. And we do that with structured AI-ready content, where Contentful lets you create content once and reuse it across any digital channel with reusable, governed content models, helping your brand become understandable at the data level. This is what makes your value easier to interpret, easier to cite, and harder to distort when your content gets summarized. You also need to scale with human-in-the-loop workflows. AI can accelerate the work, but trust comes from governance. Contentful delivers embedded AI automation and intelligence that streamlines content creation, personalization, localization, and optimization at scale. Improving operational efficiency is equally important because when content is modular and self-serve, teams ship more without dragging developers into every single update. That means faster time to market. And then with analytics, you need to understand how things are performing. You have to turn insights into engagement. Because content performance and experimentation can feed directly back into how you create and optimize, you're not just guessing, you are learning and improving your digital experiences with data in real time. And lastly, you have to be able to adapt instantly to market changes. Discovery is changing fast. Contentful's rich ecosystems of apps and integrations means you can quickly add new capabilities with zero development time, right? So these are the things we think you need to bring in into the market. And we have proof points with customers we've worked with in the past. Customers such as Asurion is a great example. They've managed 11,000 pages with structured content that stays consistent at scale. We've also highlighted before how we automate with AEO at scale with companies like BigCommerce, which increased content output by 77% and cut their backlog by 45% by automating key workflows. It's important that companies have a platform that allows them to move fast and stay flexible because you need speed for answer engines and for humans.
Totally agree. And again, all those are incredibly valid points, CJ, as to why, Valtech has, I would say, vigilantly pursued our relationship with Contentful over the years. But there's a couple things in my opinion that stand out. First, about the core platform of Contentful, and then a couple of things I think that Valtech does unique. So let me start with the Contentful side of the equation. First of all, we hear repeatedly from our client base that what Contentful does the best is what I would call the core CMS components, the ability to spin that flywheel, as you talked about, in terms of the ability to get your teams to create, edit, manage, publish, distribute content, and to do that at speed, at pace, inside a user interface that just seems to make sense. So I think that's critical for that. The second thing that we hear from our clients is, sort of this ability to really tie in and track the analytics and KPIs of what you're trying to achieve with your content strategy. I'm somewhat of a senior statesman in this world of digital. And when we first started, we had this perception that the world of content was free because we didn't need to print it and mail it and do all the rest of it. But it turns out when you're creating, 10, 20, 30,000 pages of content, it comes at a cost. And so what's critical is that we end up with this sort of mindset of your teams of a Darwinian approach to content creation, that you should only create content that has some sort of objective outcome tied to it, some KPI of measurement. What's happening now is that content creation process may not be you as a human, but might be you assisted with some AI. And the scale at which you're doing that obviously increases exponentially. Therefore, the metrics and analytics side of the equation is critically important to understand that you are now, essentially almost building a living organism that you need to manage and optimize at a continuous relationship. And then the third point I'll just quickly touch on here from a contentful standpoint is the ability, I think what you mentioned, to be adaptable, to be able to be extensible, to be able to tie other sort of plugins and other such things into the core component of what Contentful brings to the table, such that you have the full suite of things that are necessary to operate in this modern world. And I'll just try and tie that together lastly with sort of the Valtech perspective there, that, Valtech as a global agency, operating in every region in the globe, we have deep experiences with organizations who share that sort of mindset of the challenges of trying to operate in a global environment where they're managing not only content but commerce. And they're doing that where the lifeblood of their organization is in some way tied to the digital side of this, that they're not interested in simply putting up a brochure, but the digital footprint that they occupy is core to their business and core to their success. And those are the clients that I think Valtech is most successful with.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to the close of our discussion.
Time flies.
That was quick. It really does. It really does.
But 5,000 questions, CJ's. You got to just pick a couple, narrow it down.
Yeah, so I see 3 here that I want to ask. Shannon, I'm going to throw the first 2 at you. The first one is, how do we know what AI tools like Google and ChatGPT are saying about our brand today?
Well, you don't. Not in any concrete fashion. Because, of course, what's happening is those AI agents, similar to the way that you were indexed in the first place, they're actually coming to your site, indexing your content, but then they are essentially reconstituting that content inside their own tone of voice. So in many ways, actually, CJ, it's analogous to the difference between advertising and PR. And as a marketer, you can put out an ad and control the message and say, this is sort of who we are, what we do, and what we stand for. But PR is essentially saying that, but then having it interpreted through the lens of, either your customers or sort of sometimes even your detractors. And so it's kind of the collective response of understanding how your brand is being interpreted by the masses as opposed to what you as the marketer get to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. So let me throw a second question at you based on your leadership experience. So if clicks are going away, how are you thinking about attribution and improving impact to leadership?
Well, again, as someone who's been doing this for a long time, I remember the early days of the internet where it was all about eyeballs. If you remember that expression, it was all about just how many people saw something. But they didn't do anything with it. Mostly this was in relation to banner ads. At the end of the day, those chickens came home to roost. Is that the analogy or something like that? Ultimately, the reality is that tangible metrics matter for a reason, that there has to be a set of agreed upon outcomes or KPIs that you as the marketing team has established as your benchmarks in order to judge what is success and failure, and coming up with some of those metrics that might go beyond the idea of a click, but still can be measured in an empirical fashion. I think we're still trying to sort out what some of those might be, because this is going to be a rapidly evolving space in the next, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months.
So the last question I want to answer is, what should we be actually measuring now if buyers are getting their answers from AI before they come to our site? And I think it's important to remember something we said earlier. It's like success is no longer measured by the click. It's measured by whether or not AI trusts your brand enough to cite it as a definitive source. We may not have the hard and fast ways to quantify this today. There may be some ways to do it, but I think it's more of taking that qualitative approach and almost searching for yourself and seeing how you show up in these AI overviews, and then using that to measure how your content is helping supporting how your brand is delivered, how your differentiators are communicated, how you're compared to your competitors, right? You don't want the AI overview to bypass your sales funnel, but you need to understand how you are showing up in these overviews.
Yeah. And I would add to that for me, CJ, that old adage of showing up is half the job,
Hmm.
but it's not the full job is still, I think, important here. That absolutely you need to be there and we need to make sure that you're there and you need to measure if you're there. But I would suggest to the marketers watching right now to constantly push for very hard metrics to be able to uh, claim attribution for the work that they're doing, especially given times of economic uncertainty.
Hmm.
Having those hard metrics, I think, is a worthwhile endeavor to continue to strive for.
I agree. And with that, I want to thank everyone for their time in joining us today as we went through this discussion. If you guys have any questions, please let us know. Thank you all.
Thanks, CJ.